Your next step in the process is employees. Now, if you're a corporation, like I recommend, you yourself are an employee. But as far as bringing other people in, whether it's reception, whether it's someone who is filing for you, or therapists who work and use your office when you're not, or you have many rooms and you have numerous therapists, eventually you're going to want to hire employees. And to do that, you want to start off by finding them, of course. And how do you do that? Well, there's numerous options available from a standpoint of listing. I've used Craigslist in the past. Now, Craigslist is free, but when you post job listings, they charge corporations for that and companies of any kind for the listing of employment opportunities. There's other groups out there, Monster.com. There's CareerBuilder.com. Local newspapers have listings. Now, people don't often actually read the actual paper for that, but they have online resources for you to advertise. You might want to look at something like ZipRecruiter.com, and they post to over 100 different boards for you automatically. Indeed.com. But social media, just asking your friends, hey, I'm looking for a receptionist. We're going to pay X amount of dollars per hour. If you know anybody who's qualified, please have them send their resume to blah, 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 and mention you as the contact person. The nice thing about social media is you develop your friend list, and when you do get a referral from somebody, you can ask them, what do you think? What do you know about this person? And we'll talk about questions in a moment, but you want to make sure that you have a referral from maybe a friend first before you look at a complete utter stranger. When you interview, you want to determine certain characteristics. You can ask them outright, or you can find out from a standpoint of referrals, but certain things that you want in an employee, write those down. So I'll tell you some things that we looked for in our clinics. We wanted people who had excellent attendance and dependability, flexibility, integrity, and honesty. We want motivated and dedicated people. We want people who are detail-oriented, especially when it comes to SOAP notes and that kind of thing and charting. You want someone who's team-oriented. Not a lone wolf who's working for you. You want people who have a strong work ethic, people who are going to be on time, obviously, but you want someone who is polite and approachable and positive. Negative employees are hard to deal with, and they affect everybody else in the office. And when it comes to communication skills, let's say you're hiring someone who's going to be answering phones for you. The very first interview needs to be, guess what? On the phone. Don't text them, don't have them come in person. Talk to them on the phone first. Do your pre-interview on the phone and see how they handle themselves. See how they talk on the phone. How do they smile on the phone? Can you tell if the person has a positive energy or a positive way they demonstrate themselves on the phone? If you like what you hear, bring them in and see how they present themselves in person, so how they would deal with your clients in person in the office situation. I've actually had people actually answer the phone for me when a live call came in, just to see how they handle something they had no idea how to handle the call, because that's going to happen at first. How they deal with not knowing what to say, and have them do a live answering of the phone. If you're hiring a massage therapist, you want to obviously have them maybe do a small, very short massage. I'll often ask for maybe a 15-minute demonstration. I don't want to ask for an hour and a half. That's not right. But have them do a short massage and intake, and see how they communicate and how their hands, the skills that they have as well. That's important to do. Realize they'll be nervous, but it's important for that interview process. You want to develop interview questions that identify those things, but you also want to really find out, again, list what you need for your clinic, and your needs and my needs might be different. The questions that you ask during the interview should be really written out ahead of time. Don't just wing it when you get to the interview. Some questions that I like to ask is, what made you decide to apply at our clinic? Tell me about yourself and your last job or your current job that you were in. You say, when we call previous employers references, what are they likely to tell us about you in regards to your dependability and your attendance? You can ask them to tell you about a time they demonstrated trustworthiness or integrity in school or at work. A great question is, give me a specific occasion when you followed a policy in which you did not agree. It's interesting with massage therapists how they respond to that, because some are real rule followers and some are very much rule breakers, and you want to see how do they handle policies, because you're going to have policies for your clinic and they might not agree with all those policies, but how will they deal with that when that time comes? There are certain questions you just cannot ask, or even infer or gently bring up in a conversation or joke about. You just cannot ask, because if you ask those questions or bring certain topics up and they don't get the job, they can sue you for that. So These are off the table. These questions I'm going to talk to you about. So the first one is age. You can't talk about their age. You can't talk about race or their ethnicity or their color of their skin. You can't even bring that up. You can't talk about the heritage of what country their family came from. You can't talk about their gender or what sex they are. Obviously, if they're male or female and that's apparent, great, but don't bring it up or don't talk about how difficult is it as a woman to don't. The country of their origin and what birthplace or where were you born, can't ask that. Can't ask about their religion or their disabilities or marital or family status. You can't ask about pregnancy. You can't even ask about if they have any kids or what age are your kids. Can't ask about that. So you want to be careful when it comes to asking about their U.S. citizenship. Now, you can't ask about that, but once you decide to hire them, you are required to both get identification from them and report them. We'll talk about that in a second, but you have to report them within a certain period of time after a hire to guarantee they actually have no problems with Homeland Security and they are a U.S. citizen. So don't ask during the hiring process, but you do have to verify it later. You can't ask about any visual, speech, or hearing disabilities. You can't ask if they're planning to have a family, if so, when. And you can't ever ask questions about their past employment history from the standpoint of if they filed a workers' compensation claim. Have you ever, taken time off from an injury? You can't ask those kinds of questions whatsoever. You can't ask about how many days of work did they miss the previous year or what off-the-job activities they participate in. If they want to bring up their hobbies, that's fine, but I can't ask about those. And that sounds crazy, but don't. You can't ask about working with partners, how well they work with a male or a female partner. You can't ask about where they grew up, as well as where they are in the birth order of their family. So what child are you, the oldest? Nope, don't ask about that either. You can't ask about their children as far as daycare needs or child care needs. If they bring it up, great, but don't ask any more questions about it. You can't ask about where they went to high school. You can't ask about what their wife does for a living or their spouse does for a living, because that's asking about marital status. You also be careful about asking about what time they want off for religious holidays, because that brings up the religious aspect. You can't ask if they're comfortable working for a female boss or a male boss. If you were to make a statement, there's a large disparity between your age and your potential coworkers, is that going to be a problem for you? You can't ask that. You can't ask about how long it's going to be until they want to retire. And lastly, you may not ask about if there's been any serious illnesses they've had in the last year. So please be careful. You can do more research about what questions you can and cannot answer, but it happens quite a bit. And when you're interviewing and asking for references, oftentimes when you're asking questions of that person, the reference they've given, you have to be very careful about the questions you ask there as well, because those questions will get back to the person you're interviewing. If you call up a company and they have a glowing review, and the question always is, would you hire them again? And how they answer that will tell you quite a bit about the person. If all they give you is their start date, their end date, their job title, and how much they got paid, that means there probably is a problem with that employee and they don't want to get sued. So as you give a reference for a past employee and that person was a bad egg, they had problems with your company, again, all you're going to want to give is the start date, end date, job title, and how much money they made, and that's it. Don't give any other derogatory information, because if you did in a reference you were negative and they did not get the job because of that, you can get sued. Let's talk about the most common hiring mistakes and how to avoid them. Number one is relying on the interview to evaluate a potential candidate. If it's just the interview. There's a massive study by John and Rhonda Hunter at the University of Michigan years ago, and they found the usefulness of an interview in accurately predicting the quality of an employee was less than 2%. In other words, if you flipped a coin, you'd be right half the time, and if you added the interview, you'd be right 52% of the time. So you want to add more than just the interview. You want to have references. You want to have the person maybe do an example of their work or do other testing. There's actually online tests you can use as well. So don't rely solely on the interview, because it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to get good information. They may be bad at interviews. They just don't do well at interviews, but they're a phenomenal employee. Or they can be a bad employee and they're great at pulling the wool over your eyes. So be careful of that. Mistake number two is using successful people as a model. So if you have somebody who is an amazing employee, right? I had an employee years ago. She was 23 years old. She was honest. She was great at what she did. She got all of her work done in half the time, and she had 2 years of college. So if I were to say, geez, I need to hire people who are 23 years old, female, 2 years of college, I'll have a great employee. Well, that's not necessarily true, because I've had people who were employees who were 65 years old with no college, and they did an amazing job for me. So it doesn't make sense to build a protocol for what you're looking for an employee based on a person. You want to base it on traits, characteristics, and abilities and experience, not just on somebody else. Mistake number 3 is setting too many criteria. If you have way too many criteria of what you're looking for, you're not going to find the right person. Keep it to around 6 or 8 things for sure the person has to have, and you'll be better off. Mistake number 4 is evaluating personality instead of job skills. I know it's easy in my early years as a business owner. I liked the person, they're fun, they're a great personality, and I hired them regardless of their experience. And unless they're a person who does public relations work and just working with clients, you want to make sure they have skills, not just a great personality. So maybe you want to produce a job skills test, again, online, or a specific one in your office. Testing is fine and legal as long as the questions on that test don't break those legalities I discussed earlier. Mistake number 5 is using yourself as an example. If you find you think, oh, I want someone just like me, that's not good. I actually made sure that all the people I hired over the years were not like me. One of me was enough. I wanted people who had skills that I did not have. And Henry Ford talked about that years ago, about surrounding himself with people who were smarter than him, had skills that he didn't have, and that made him a better business owner. Mistake number 6 is not using statistically validated testing. So if you're going to have a test, make sure it's a valid test. Just again, online, do some research for employee hiring testing, and you'll find some companies that for a flat fee, they can sit down at a computer and take a test. And those tests talk about skills, but they also talk about honesty. They'll ask the same question maybe 3 different ways and see if the person's consistent. So those tests are very, very valuable if you want to make sure you make a great hire and don't mishire in the job position you're trying to fill. Mistake number 7 is not researching the reason someone failed in their last job. And really the way to find that out is to ask the potential employee during the interview and to ask the previous job the reference they have. If they have a bad reference, likely they're not going to give that reference to you. They don't want you talking to that person. So you're going to have to kind of hone that and work that out of the person you're interviewing in a cautious way and have them say, tell me something about yourself. Tell me about your past job. Why didn't it work out? Tell me something positive about yourself. Tell me your downsides and your negatives about you, and see if they'll cough it up. They may. Number 8 is relying on general good people criteria. So, you can't go based on the person just a good person. You want to hire skills, not personality. Number 9 is not doing a careful background reference check. You must verify references. I can't tell you how many times I've had people I've seen friends of mine own companies, I like the person, didn't check the references at all. So don't be afraid of that. If they don't give you references and you call a previous company they worked for, you still can do that. If they mention they worked for Acme Incorporated in this city, call that company up and say you need to talk to your personnel department about a past employee and ask, can you tell me anything about that employee? Don't just call the references, call the companies as well. One side note about hiring is that sometimes you don't need to have a full-time person in your company. You have certain jobs you want to have done, certain projects you need taken care of. Don't underestimate the power and wonders of college interns. Universities, community colleges all have typical programs in their career departments where students have to have a certain number of hours of internship, and they'll come and do work for you for darn near free, and that will give them experience and will help you out for your project. Once you've flipped your coin and you hired your employee, there's several things you need to do on the first day of hire. The first is fill out a W-4 form, which is going to be the basic information, their social security number. It's going to have how many deductions they want for their taxes, but you need to have that filled out right away. Within 3 days of hiring, you have to fill out an I-9 form. That's with the government. You can go online and do that. But you need to have that filled out, and it verifies their employee eligibility verification and verifies they're a U.S. citizen or able to work in our country. Within 20 days in Washington State, we have a program called the New Hire Reporting Act. In your state might have the same thing, but that verifies that the person has no back monies owed to for child support, for example. If they do, you'll have to garnish garnish their wages sometimes, and you need to make sure that person doesn't have their name in that database, because it's your responsibility to fill that information out. It's also your responsibility to withhold and send money onto that government agency for back monies due. It's kind of a pain. I've had it happen a couple times in the history of my companies, and that all that labor is on your shoulders. And yes, you can actually charge a fee for that, but the fee is charged to the employee, not the parent who has the child, who is owed the child support. Unless it's your own child, I recommend against hiring minors for numerous reasons. Just from a protection for yourself standpoint, hiring minors is not good in a massage environment. I don't recommend it. If you want to hire someone to do some filing for you, perhaps, as long as they're supervised. But if you do want to hire minors, your state probably requires you, or your city requires you, to fill out special paperwork and have a special license just to hire minors. So look into that before you do. Also be aware of the minimum wage. I know that in our state, in Washington State, there are a number of cities who are pushing the envelope and wanting a higher and higher minimum wage. And it's much more than what the rest of the country pays. And you want to make sure you're paying your employees at least minimum wage, and don't get caught in that. Now, I have a feeling if your employee knows what the minimum wage laws are going to be, and if you're not paying that, they're going to alert you to your problem. But if they don't ask for minimum wage, there might be a citizenship issue. Don't be in trouble for not following through and doing what the law says. So verify their citizenship and then pay them at least minimum wage for that job. You also need to post the legal aspects of employment in your offices. So oftentimes the employment security or the state of that you are having your business in will require certain posters of employee rights are posted at the place of business. So what we would do is we would go online, get the information and print it out, and just put it in the lunchroom on the wall with a tack, and it would say, please read this. You also can have the person sign a copy of those posters and put a signed copy in their employee manual that you have, employee file, that you've got a copy of that in your records, that they did see that and are aware of it. You also want to be aware of discrimination in general. This is a whole big topic on not discriminating on your employees, and be careful of that. It comes down to so many topics, but I could teach an entire seminar on preventing discrimination in the workplace. But be careful of how you run your business, and be careful from a sex standpoint of like saying we'll only hire female therapists. Now, if you're in a spa that just works with females and they're walking around nude in the spa areas and such, yes, you can hire just females for that. But if it's an office situation, it's the front office, you can't hire based on that. You can't hire based on religion. If you're a certain religious sect and you only want to hire for that, you better talk to a lawyer to make sure you have yourself covered in that area. So just watch out for discrimination in general, and don't be ambivalent to the laws. I recommend when hiring somebody to have a 90-day probationary period in your letter of confirming their employment, not a contract. In your letter confirming their employment, have it clearly stated that they are a temporary employee. It's not a permanent employee status, it's probationary employment. And at 90 days, you will decide after the review if they will become a permanent employee at that point. That saves you from a standpoint of unemployment insurance, because if they are unemployed after that, they can file a claim with the state, and you'll be on the hook for all those taxes for firing someone or letting somebody go. So be careful of that, and make sure that you have them as a temporary employee. Let's talk about hiring massage therapists and how you want to pay them. There's several ways to do that. Typically, you'll pay on a percentage basis oftentimes in most clinics. After years of doing that, I personally went to an hourly basis. My therapist otherwise would say, what do I have for the day? And I'd tell them and say, cross me out, I'm going to go shopping. Well, inevitably, somebody would call up and say, I want a massage today. Do you have a 2 o'clock? And I'll say, no, there's no therapist available because they're gone. So instead, I would pay my therapist a flat hourly rate, regardless of whether massaged or made coffee or if they did filing for me. They got paid a lower rate, but they got paid for every hour they were there. And that way, I had people on staff to be able to work. If you pay on a percentage basis, typically you're either going to pay on the actual money received. That means after insurance pays or whatever. They pay on the actual cash when it comes in the door, or actual amount of money received after paying credit card charges. But they get paid on the actual money received, or they get a percentage of money billed. And the onus is on you to make sure that as the owner that you get paid from those insurance companies. So they would get a smaller amount, but they're guaranteed to work no matter what. I recommend that because that keeps the employee out of the billing process. They're not keeping their fingers in your books. They get paid a certain percentage or a certain amount of money per massage, regardless of if you get paid or not. And that requires you to be in charge of the books and keeps them away from monitoring or auditing your books. When you do pay on a percentage basis, though, you have to be careful, because if you pay on a percentage basis, how do you give a raise? So let's say that you pay 50% and that person's a $100 fee, it's a 50% pay, and they want a raise. Well, I have to raise my fee $2 for every dollar I give them in increase, and that's not right. So what I do is I had a therapist that came to me years ago, and she was upset because she was getting $55 or 55% of every $100 fee, and her friends at their place of business got 70% of the fee. Well, her friends' offices were charging $60 per massage. We were charging $100 per massage. At 55%, my therapist got $55. Her friends got 70% of $60. They got less money per massage than my employee did, but she was upset her percentage was lower. And so I talked to her about this, and I said, look, you're getting a better deal. And she said, but they're making a higher percentage. And I kept repeating it, and I finally thought, okay. I said, tell you what, I'm going to give you 90% of the massage. And she said, really? I said, yep, but I'm dropping my prices to $1. And she's like, and I said, look, we cannot look at the percentage. We look at how much money you make. So from that point on, when I negotiated for people's income with me, I would say, look, how much money do you want to make per massage? What's fair and reasonable? And they would give me that amount. And I would say, okay, let's say it's $40 per massage. I'm going to pay you to do that treatment. Is it fair to you as the business owner who's responsible for the rent, who's responsible for advertising to get people to come in here, who's responsible for the linens and everything? Is it fair for me to add on top of what I pay you amount of money to make my business run? And they usually say, well, yeah, of course. I said, great. So I'm going to pay you this much money per massage. What I charge for massage is irrelevant. That's my responsibility to get people in the door, and I'll pay you what we've negotiated. Is that fair? And they say, yes. Write that down. So when I give them a raise, I can give them a raise. I'm not dealing with percentages. It's a very, very important tactic when you deal with employees, and it saves you a ton of trouble later, because if you want to give them a raise, you cannot keep giving percentages away. As you increase that percentage, it significantly decreases the amount of money you make to run your clinic. So be careful on your percentage payment systems. So now that you've hired your employees and you want to keep your employees, so how do you do that? How do you spend all the time hiring someone? You spend all your investment in the interview process, you've trained them, and now you want to keep them, because losing employees is actually very expensive and very time wasting. So to keep employees, one of the best ways is giving them recognition. Just say thank you. Thank you for a job well done. I left a job years ago because I was never appreciated. They never thanked me for my work. They may have appreciated me, but I never heard it, and I felt like I wasn't really cared about by their company. Number 2 is reward specific achievements, and give them maybe bonuses or something, but you don't have to give them big bonuses. Maybe non-cash gifts, maybe a gift certificate for a restaurant as a thank you, or recognition before their peers at the office. Number 3 is offering flexible work schedules. Employees love the ability to have a flexible work schedule. If you give them that ability to work around their needs, they're much more likely to stay with you versus being strict and firm and inflexible with that. Number 4 is show pictures and bios of the new employees in maybe a newsletter or on their website. Give them recognition before the community for their work and for their background. Be proud of having them on staff. Number 5, acknowledge their birthdays. Maybe give them a day off for their birthday as a thank you, a paid day off. Number 6 is celebrate the anniversary of their first day. Maybe take the employees out to lunch or something as a special recognition for that. Number 7, ask your employees their opinions and truly use their ideas when they're appropriate. Employees want to be heard, they want to be listened to, they want to feel important. And if you listen to what they say and you actually ask and use their ideas and give them credit for their ideas, that's a powerful, powerful motivator. Number 8 is facilitate your employees' professional development. Maybe you'll pay for a percentage or all of their CE costs each year, or give them a budget for continuing education and training. Number 9 is to match the talents, traits, and skills of the individual to their job. There's an online program called Skills1, skillsone.com, and they're great at helping find out what the person's skills are. And so in my company, I hired a personal assistant years ago, And when he wasn't doing work specifically for me, I had him train on a computer to do certain software work for me. Well, he had a knack for doing it. He was so good at it. He ended up developing videos for me and website design. And I moved him from a personal assistant into my IT and my web guy. And he did a phenomenal job because that was his giftings. And so use your employees where they're best at, and their skills are going to be the most used. You also, number 10, want to create traditions maybe, or holiday dinners or parties, so every year they can look forward to that. Maybe it's a charity drive you'll work on as a team together. They can look forward to that. Number 11 is hire the right people to begin with. If you hire the right person, I'm much happier in the job versus having the wrong person in that job and making them feel every day something's just not quite right. Number 12, offer flexible scheduling for holidays if it's feasible. So if it's New Year's Day, maybe you'll close your office at 3 in the afternoon or something. Number 13, maybe keep your lunch once in a while just because. Number 14, bring chocolate anything. Number 15, have clear systems in place. We'll talk about systems in this program, but systems are very important to make sure your company runs smoothly and with less stress. Number 16, have employment agreements, not contracts, but agreements that spell out the responsibilities, what you'll do, and how their compensation system works. So it's very, very clear, unless in verbally, because verbal agreements are often forgotten. Number 17 is truly train your employees to begin with. If you don't train your employees properly, they're going to always feel like they're trying to make up for lost time, trying to catch up, and you'll be frustrated because they're not doing the job right, but it's all your responsibility. So train them to begin with to make them happier. Number 18 is give your employees the tools to do the job. So if you're asking them to do their work and they need something, often will come to you, say, hey, I really could use this. If it makes sense, get it for them because they're going to feel less frustrated in their work. Number 19 is create great office atmosphere, and that's really your job. And whether it's decor or background music or a clean working environment or just functioning equipment, not having a broken office chair, make sure that they're taken care of in that office. 20, give the support they need, maybe a person to call for computer help. If they have computer issues, say, here's a guy's number, call this person if you have any computer problems at all. They'll take care of you. Number 21, have creative benefit plans. Just find ways to have small benefits that the person likes and ask them, what benefits would you like to see? Number 22 is just general recognition in the company. 23 is great communication. Number 24, give them empowerment. Engage your employees in decision-making processes. When systems come up or problems come up that need to be dealt with, ask the employee's opinion and get them involved with that and give them the power to make decisions in certain areas and have the ability to make those choices have an effect on their company. Number 25, and lastly, just have fun. Make it a fun environment. Have good boundaries, but make it a fun place to work. Let's talk about the legal aspects of employees and things to keep you out of hot water. When you have policies for your employees, they should be clear, they should be in writing, and they should make sense. Policies, for example, about appearance. Make sure that all the policies are based on sound reason and there's a good reason for it versus just your opinion. And they should have some exceptions. For example, if you have a no beard policy, but you have somebody who has a religious reason for having a beard, or if it's an African American man who has a condition called pseudofolliculitis barbae, where they can't shave and it causes raised bumps and scarring, you want to make sure that you have flexibility in that versus saying no beards or you're fired. You also want to make sure that the requirements are for employee safety. There's a reason behind it from a safety standard. Make sure that your rules are uniform and they're part of the nature of the job. Acceptable appearance of employees is to protect the company image. So it's okay to say, no cleavage being exposed, or it's okay to say, you have to have sleeves on your shirts versus sleeveless. But that goes for guys and gals both, right? So make sure that it's consistent and it's for both male and female. In the news just recently, there was a JCPenney's has sent a woman home because she was wearing shorts at work. And those shorts were sold by the company in the career department, saying they were acceptable to wear in a career job. But their policy said no employee could wear shorts at any time at the store as a salesperson, male or female. So although they were technically career branded shorts, it wasn't okay because the store didn't allow shorts. So same as your clinic, if you say no shorts, it applies to both male and female. In my school, we had problems with students trying to be really absurd in the student clinic. And so we had a hair color policy, and all we said was the color had to appear on humans naturally. So if they came up with blueberry colored hair, it wasn't okay. And honestly, today, compared to 15 years ago, I don't really care. People are fine. My daughter has purple hair. So back then, the policy was kind of iffy to begin with, to say, well, it has to appear in nature. Well, guess what? It probably does appear in nature somewhere. So be careful when it comes to that. Tattoos, Costco, I know, years ago said you had to cover them up, and I saw people with bandages every day on their neck, and now it's totally acceptable to have that. So make sure your policies fit with the current philosophy of society at large, and you're not being picky on people just because of your own personal taste. When you have employees with your company, it's important that you have an at-will agreement. And when you have your employment agreement, it says somewhere in there that this is an at-will agreement. And that's a legal term. And that means that person can quit at will, and you can let them go at will with no reasons given. As a matter of fact, giving reasons to let somebody go actually puts you at risk for a lawsuit. So when someone says, why am I being let go? You just say it's not working out. And you don't give a specific reason, because if you give them a specific reason, they actually can possibly sue you for that reason. So please just say it's not working out and give them no reason for that. If they are having issues with the company, they're not doing a good job, it should show up in a series of the reviews showing that they're missing the standards that are required, and you have documentation they've not been doing a good job up to that point. But again, at will is the most important thing to have in the agreement. Again, document everything with the employee. If there's problems, it will show up in their file. You have a history of issues with that person for whatever reasons. You don't have to say, well, after the third time you're fired. You can just say, here's our expectations. Here's what you're not doing. Put that in their file. And when the time comes, you let them go and don't give them a reason. If you do fire someone, please make sure it's not about age. The Age Discrimination Employment Act of 1967, the ADEA, protects certain applicants and employees from 40 years of age and older from discrimination when it comes to hiring or promotion or discharge. So please, please, please be careful of that. You can get yourself in some serious hot water. If your employees are hourly, it's your responsibility to have them have approval for overtime, and you want to have it clear in the employee manual that no overtime is approved without written permission by the owner, because it can be abused. And if the employee comes in and they're hourly, and you have an employment log where they sign in and sign out, every day or every couple of days it needs to have been filled out. And if the employee is not doing it, it's your problem. It's your fault. I had an employee once who we had hired her, and my campus manager for my school was coming in and was giving me this employment log. And the very first time she came in, I was stunned because she had had 188 hours for a 2-week period. Well, it should be about 80 hours for 2 weeks, not 188. So I asked her, the campus manager, and she went back to the employee, and the employee said, well, geez, I did a lot of work at home as I'm setting up my office, and I had some research to get through some paperwork. It won't happen again. Well, 2 weeks go by. Next time I was given the hours to make payments, she had 183 hours for 2 weeks, not 80. And we asked her, and the campus manager said, well, she said she did it. The third time, she had 179 hours, and I had to pay it. And I two things on this. First of all, we should have been looking every day to see the hours that she was logging. But she wouldn't list any hours until the end of the 2 weeks, and she'd fill it in all at once and sign it. I called my attorney. He said, you have two options. Either you pay her, or you pay her and you fire her. But either way, you pay her. So please monitor your employment logs. So it's your job to watch and look at those employment logs as far as from an hourly standpoint of how many hours they're logging, and stay up on top of it. Stay and watch and see how much they're putting in their manuals or in your employment hour logs, and watch out for theft of misinformation. I also had an employee once who signed in, broke the law, and signed out. And I called my attorney up, and he said, you have to pay her. I said, are you serious? He said, yep. If they signed in as a postal employee, went postal, killed everybody, and signed out, the government still has to pay them for their time. It doesn't matter if your employee is doing their job or not. If they come into your office and they sign in and then sign out, you're responsible to pay them for their time, not how good they did their job. So your options are to pay or pay and fire, but realize you cannot take money back out of someone's check for not doing a good job or for breaking something. Those people will threaten that, but you don't have the right to take money away from an employee for monies earned. So be very careful with that. Talk to your attorneys before you make any stab at trying to take money away from an employee because you think they don't deserve to have that.